Hi, I'm Doug Piper, and today I've got Crispy Frey with me today. Yes, the one and only Crispy Frey, and we're both enjoying a mead. I've got one here from Moonlight Meadery, the Desire. What have you got, Crispy?
I've got a 7-year-old blueberry mead that I made, 2012. Cheers.
In a savor glass. I just noticed that. Is that the Washington, D.C.?
Oh, what a phenomenal event that is. I mean, you've got the world's preeminent food and beer pairing, over 100 different breweries, 200 different beers, and all these little amuse-bouches inside the Architectural Museum at the Smithsonian. What a life experience. Wonderful thing.
I've been hoping to go to one of those. And that was a quick diversion from our conversation, but I hadn't seen that in your glass. So Crispy was on the governing committee for 15 years of AHA, and he's a fantastic brewer. And I got to know Crispy just, I guess, coming up on a year ago.
Yep.
When you just moved down here at a barley wine meetup where we had vertical tastings and nearly ended up horizontal.
That's right.
But we met there, and then our friendship has blossomed from there. And then, so I got interested in meads about 6 months ago after Al Boyce convinced me that we needed a mead study group, and Crispy was actually instrumental in helping getting some folks recruited in that. And then he gave me a call and said, "Hey, Doug, I'm doing this presentation Tuesday, July 16th. This was 2019 at White Labs in Asheville, North Carolina on meads. Yep. Maybe you'd want to record it." And I said, "Yeah, baby, I'm in." So I showed up with equipment. Crispy was all set to go. And I had the camera set up. Everything was working perfectly. And about 15 minutes into our presentation, I realized I had not started the camera. So Crispy is here today to help me cover the intro, which did not get captured due to my inaptitude with the camera. So Crispy, maybe you can just kind of start out, give a little bit of history on your vast, because I really just didn't touch on it, but 15 years in AHA is pretty impressive.
Well, thanks. And it was very meaningful for me to be able to give back to our community of homebrewers. And I was very honored the first time I got elected. And by the second time I got elected, I expected it. No, but I did have a good run there. And I was able to put together the club insurance program and research and education fund. And actually, I was chair for 4 years. And then that was passed on to Roxanne, who's doing a bang-up job. And I also had the privilege of being on the Brewers Association Board of Directors for 9 years, and as one of the 2 homebrewer designees on that board, and got to meet with some of the rock stars of the industry, and of course with the BA staff, Charlie Papazian and all. So that was really fulfilling. I started homebrewing back in '94 when I moved to Michigan. So I've been homebrewing for 25 years. I have about 425 batches of homebrew underneath my belt.
Whoa, you said that really fast. Repeat that number again.
425 batches of beer under my belt. And yes, my belt is getting expanded. And I also probably about 60, 70 batches of meads and about 40 batches of ciders.
Now, I was talking to Denny Kahn.
Mm-hmm.
And Denny's going to do a webinar. We hadn't settled on the date, but he was talking about 500 batches.
Yes, he hit the big 500. And
you're right there with him.
Yeah. Well, don't have a life, I guess, or I have a lot of friends who help me drink it.
Wow.
Either way. And I'll tell you what, a subject for another webinar is I've actually done the same recipe 84 times with one variant change on almost every one. So it's my Nearly Nirvana Pale Ale, my homage to Sierra Nevada, and it was through doing that recipe time and time again, maybe changing crystal for caramel or temperature by 2 degrees, I learned my brewing process.
Well, we do need it, but we need to get Denny on to talk about it, because he's done one nearly that many, because he was telling me about all the variations he's done with this one batch. So I didn't know you had both done that, and it would be cool for you both to compare notes.
That would be, and do you remember? Was it his rye IPA?
Well, don't hold me to it. It's whatever his favorite is. So,
Well, it's one of my favorite recipes, and it's all Denny, and I love it, and I love Denny. So, hi, Denny.
Good, good. Well, now we know. We hadn't settled on a subject, so I think now we have. So, all right. So, well, Denny, you're on, buddy.
So, with all this brewing background, I did want to expand a little bit about my mead experience, because my first years of making mead were pretty much terrible. I think I made my first mead in 1994, just about the time I started homebrewing. It was alcohol. It had heat that I didn't like. Gave it to a friend of mine who said that he could distill it or do something with it. And I tried again and again. And I probably did about 5 batches by 1999 in the 5 years, one a year. And they were miserable. There wasn't a one that I liked. And I was putting fruit in them, and I'm putting vanilla beans or whatever, what I could find through the internet, some suggestions. But it wasn't until really, and I'm going to give credit to a dear friend of mine, that this book came out, The Complete Mead Maker by Ken Schramm. I think that was probably 2002, 2003. And you'll see later in the presentation that he was able to record discussions about the keys of making a really good mead. But it was through this, and now there are other good resources as well, that I got back to it, because I quit. I didn't want to make a mead for 3-4 years. It was like wasting expensive, it's not cheap. It's more dear than making a beer. And to just keep giving it to a friend of mine to make ethanol, basically, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. What
would you say is about 3 times as much?
3 times as much expense? Well, yeah.
Beer versus mead.
Well, I can do a quick math here. I'm paying $60 a gallon. I make a 4-gallon batch, so there's $60 for the honey. Fruit, I usually use 1.5 to 2 gallons at $25, $20 a gallon. So there's $40, $50. Little things like the nutrients and yeast strains and all. You're pushing up about $125, $120 for a really high quality melomel fruit mead, and that's $30 a gallon. Well, heck.
$25 will get you five gallons of beer pretty well.
Yeah, maybe 30, 35 if you're all graining, but obviously it's not about the money. And when you have something that's bold and delicious like this, I mean, you're only going to drink a 6-ounce snifter. If you want to knock down 2 12-ouncers, well, you may need to talk to somebody.
Yeah, yours looks bigger than mine.
Well,
I put it up closer to the camera.
I'm not touching that one. So, there are a lot of important things about making mead, and you'll have some of that in the MALT Club meeting that you recorded. But really, when you think about spending that sort of money, and you can make smaller batches, you can make 1 and 2 gallon batches, but the person you have to keep to make happy is you. Obviously, if you're making a lot of this and you want to impress your friends, with more than just an 85 IBU IPA, double IPA, milkshake IPA, whatever that you may be making your beers with. But they're delicate, they're lovely, they're bold. Kind of strange to say delicate and bold, but it depends what type you make. But there are just all sorts of ways to make a wonderful mead. And whether it's just going to be a still, simple mead, just honey, water, and yeast, I would say the most popular mead, both commercially, whether you're talking about Schramm or Fairbrother or Bee Nectar or any of the other Prairie Rose. I mean, there's hundreds of meaderies now. I think it's one of the fastest growing commercial categories. Still very small, but it's growing. There's really no wrong or right, but melomels are fruited meads are probably the most popular. Yeah. And things like raspberries and blackberries, and I'm learning even blueberries and strawberries, if you use enough of them, you can really get a great aroma and flavor. And I probably say this later on in the presentation, but for me, I like to use 2 to 3 pounds per gallon of finished product of fruit. So if I'm making a 5-gallon batch, I typically use about 15 pounds of fruit, and that really shines through.
Yeah, so, I know Michael Fairbrothers told me when we were doing the webinar, he said, if you look at his bottle, he said, just imagine it a third full of fruit. And that's pretty well what he does to his.
So, this is going to be one form of education. Schramm's book's another. Every year at the National Homebrew Conference, there's at least typically there's a couple of mead makers on different topics. And if you're an AHA member, you can go back to years past and listen to them. Maybe within your club or these podcasts, you can find people who've made good mead, listen to them, get their advice, but there's nothing like experience. And what I have found, meads over the years, they tend to improve. I haven't found a point where they decline. Like a barley wine, 2, 3, 4 years, the hops start going off. Sour beers, maybe 6, 7 years. But I think it was Ken Schramm who said in his book, if you ever find some lost mead, it's never a loss. It's always a great find. Meaning we found together a 10-year-old case of meads, and they were soft and they were smooth, and the alcohols had really just gotten so much rounder and nicer. So experience, keep trying, and there is a patience factor. I mean, even with staggered nutrient additions that we'll talk about later, you may have your mead done in 30 days, done in as completely fermented, but they'll always benefit from 6 to 12 months of aging. And if you're impatient, you will notice that the last bottle you drink is the best. Mm-hmm. So the lesson there I learned was continue to make several batches, have it backed up. So I'm drinking that 1.5 to 2-year-old mead when it's in its prime, and I'm sharing it with pride with everybody else, versus drinking something that's filled with hot alcohol and just isn't that round, beautiful taste. So when I get into the presentation in the MALT Club meeting, one thing I kind of alluded to that was lost was we're assuming that the person watching this podcast has a certain knowledge of homebrewing, and it's possible they don't. So there are some basic things that you need, equipment to make meads. Obviously, sanitation is going to be important. Understanding how to use yeast, how to rehydrate yeast if you're using the dry wine yeast. 71B, best damn yeast if you do a melomel. Just that I'd say, thank you, Lalafun. You can send me a pack.
Or more.
Or more. And when you make melomels, for God's sakes, don't make it in a carboy for primary. Put it in an open bucket, because you want to get that fruit in and out easily. Use a muslin sack, wrap it up, sanitize it, boil it in some hot water, put your fruit in, put it in the bucket. We'll talk later about having to degas and keeping the fruit wet so it doesn't mold, but modicum of equipment. And if you're a home brewer, you probably have virtually everything you need to make a mead except the honey and the proper yeast strain. And most of the folks, I would say, use a wine yeast, the dry yeast from the Lallavins and other companies. Both Y yeast and White Labs have a sweet mead yeast and a dry mead yeast. But again, I would go with the wine yeast because you are making a wine. This is a honey wine. I mean, it's virtually interchangeable to call it that around the globe. Mm-hmm. I think in Poland they have some exception to that. But other than that, because it is a wine, you want to use a wine yeast. It's going to express itself more. The honey you use, there's a virtual I'm going to use a word I can't even pronounce. So there's a lot of different types of yeast out there, folks. And, the most commons are going to be your wildflower, your clover. I will say it later on, but, get good honey. Get good honey that's local. Get to know the beekeeper that you're buying the honey from, and you've got the whole story. Whether in North Carolina you've got sourwood trees and you've got, what are the possibilities that's going in? Virtually all your honeys are going to be some form of wildflower. To call it a pure strain, I can't come up with the right word, but to call it an orange blossom, you have to have nothing but a citrus grove around you. And I think there's a percentage, 60, 70%, and it can be tested to say, okay, this honey came 70% from an orange tree, or this came from eucalyptus, or this came from tupelo, what have you. But I'm a member of Costco. I love Costco. They got great honey, but I don't make meads from it. I use it for adding on my cereal and putting it on my fruit and things of that nature, because they're blending things from all over the world. And as good a company as they are, I would just rather know where my honey's coming from. It is a premium. You'll pay it. But if you want to have the best tasting stuff, use those best ingredients. And what is honey?
And Costco's not it, was what I think I'm hearing.
Well, your generic clover isn't, and I don't want to be banging Costco.
No. That's not the point. It could be Sam's Club. I mean,
It could be Sam's
it's
Club, Walmart,
retail.
what have you. Honey is one of the most adulterated products in the world. The Chinese honey has been banned from the U.S. for years because there were heavy metals in it, and they were putting sucrose in it just to thin it out to make it cheaper. I think the only product in the world that's cut more than that is probably olive oil or cocaine. And we're not talking about the latter one, so we'll leave that alone.
That's another webinar.
Yeah. But, the further you get away from the source, the less you know about it. And again, it's something with great pride to be able to say, I made this with Western North Carolina honey from the beekeeper in Hendersonville, who I know now, and I know where his hives are. And yeah, I pay a 200+% premium to do that. But, you can have steak or you can have a burger. They're both a pound of beef, and you pay more for better.
Well, we're both from the Carolinas. Do you mind sharing who you buy from?
Dave Stallings, I could probably see his bucket from here, but you could Google him. He's on Facebook, Dave Stallings. I think he's the Bee Master. That's it, Bee Master. And he will sell a 5-gallon container for $300.
Okay, now I should know this, but at the end of your presentation, there is a beekeeper that actually speaks, and that's actually in the presentation. That's not him, I take it.
No, but he's from the same Henderson Association of Beekeepers that I've recently joined to cross-pollinate Mead Makers with beekeepers, and And Mark was very kind to spontaneously come up and spend a good 10 minutes on some of the key aspects of beekeeping. I would like to be a beekeeper myself. My neighbors have asked me not to. If you were on my Facebook 2 days ago, you saw the black bear that went right through my backyard.
I saw that.
They'd really rather not me attract them to the neighbor. So to make it myself. Another thing to note about honey, I just want to make sure people have that knowledge. Fructose, glucose, maltose, it's virtually, all honey, grade A or B is I'm going to say 82% those sugars. And then there's about 18%. You can't go over 18.5%, I think. And then if you do water, then it becomes grade C, and it's not really good for making mead. So there are some nutrients, or I should say some, what's the word I'm thinking of? Well, yeah, nutrients, enzymes, small trace amounts that make the difference between a clover, a wildflower, mead, but they're really small amounts, quite honestly. And because it's almost all pure sugar, they do tend to ferment all the way down. When I say all the way down, if you're making a sack or big mead that's 15%, 12% alcohol, you would expect that your hydrometer to go below zero by the time you're finished, because it's going to have more alcohol than water, and you'll have a reading of like 997. So there are ways to back sweeten, and there are ways to stop your fermentation. I've not had a whole lot of luck with cold crashing, and I really don't like using chemicals, potassium sorbate, I believe it is, to stop fermentation. So I elect to put some Camden tablets in when I'm done, and then back sweeten it, adding a half a cup at a time of honey to a 4-gallon batch, getting it to the taste I want to get about a 10-10 sweetness, 10-12 final gravity to bring that honey out. But it does have you have to be cautionary about it, because you can get some really raw honey sort of aroma and flavor from that. So,
well, having had your meads, you do an excellent job. So,
well, thank you.
I can speak from experience.
Well, thank you. And when we're probably getting close to finishing up the introduction and getting back to the pre-recorded one. And when you do, you'll see again, I will harp about buying local, buying quality products. I had a conversation with Ken Schramm a few weeks ago. I can't get black currants in Western North Carolina. Actually, I think they're illegal to plant. So I was asking him, well, you seem to be down on the extracts, the extracts of currant. Why wouldn't I want to use that? And he says, well, think about how they make it. I mean, they boil it down to get rid of 80% of the water, and all these aromatics are vaporizing all over the place. And he says they pulverize the stuff. Yes, for a home brewer, you can get a nice black currant taste and aroma from an extract concentrate. But I try to go out there into the fields and pick it myself. Go to you pick raspberry, you pick blackberry, and if I want to get black currants, hey, Matt Goebel in Michigan, send me some, please. They're illegal here. So with that, it's a lovely, lovely beverage, and I'll tell you what, it really impresses the people who are not into home brewing. You know, the wine people out there, and if you do a good one and you give them a taste, and they'll just be impressed. It's not all about impressing people. Like I say, first and foremost, I want to impress myself. I want to put a beverage in my mouth that I really love, having a lot of flavor.
Well, Crispy, cheers. I appreciate you so much for doing the presentation. And at this point, basically, we will shift into the presentation that Crispy did. Again, this was recorded on Tuesday, July 16th at White Labs. They were kind enough to allow the MALT Club that was there to use the room. This was in Asheville, North Carolina, and it's also a great place to visit. So with that, we will transition to the recorded presentation from Crispy Fries on how to make mead and some of the best techniques that he can recommend. It's a great presentation. I know you'll enjoy it. Thank you.
Find that one tastes better than the other, I know I can go back and get it there locally. If I go to Costco and I get the 5 pounds of frozen 3-berry mix, you know, who knows, Chile, California, Passaic, New Jersey, who knows where this stuff came from. Not to be smirched Passaic, New Jersey, I lived in New Jersey, exit 17. Anything else there? Well, this is actually, if you follow the trail, and the honey people here can tell you, there have been some serious adultering actions on honeys. And the Chinese have been banned for years because they have heavy metals, they have pesticides, and they're putting a lot of sucrose into the honey and faking it out. And, you know, we banned it, then they started moving it to Indonesia or India. They would repackage it, move it to South America, and bring it into the US. You would think with all that transportation, they wouldn't be able to make a margin, but because of labor costs and things of that nature, they do, and it gets in here. So it is like a few other things. It's really been adulterated a lot. And you know, when you go into your McDonald's and you get your tea and you get that little packet, it doesn't say honey. What does it say? Honey sauce or something like that? You know, it just got a hint of honey. It's like a kiss of honey. So I was, and John over at Sideways will tell you, a little shocked and dismayed at the price of local good honey, but I'm biting the bullet. I mean, you can go to Costco. They're certified. Their Clover 5-pound things are going to be as cheap as you can get it. But I really suggest that you play with what you have here in the neighborhood and figure out and get to know these people and see, you know, there's always barter and cool things going on. Yeah, Carrie.
Could you go back to a minute? You sort of like asked, if you want to make mead and make money at it, you literally have to buy a winery. You have to open a winery.
In most states, you need a winery license to make mead. Yes.
If you look at Noble on Google Maps, it's labeled as a winery because they make cider that you labeled as a winery.
So you don't have to have 50 acres of pulling grapes.
No. You know, it's just licensure through the state.
It's made out of fruit.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, because like distilleries have very specific physical requirements. They're really, you know, expensive. You know, if I just wanted to have a winery, I would think you'd have to have.
Well, I can't talk to North Carolina. You know, I just moved here from Michigan last year, but they were so anxious to open them up that they were giving distillery licenses for $100 if you had a brewery license. You could get a distillery license for $100, and I don't think a meadery was that much more expensive if you had gone through the process of having a brewery license, TTB. Michigan. Yeah,
That is not the case here.
Shocked.
It's only like I don't know, $400 for the winery license once you have your TTB approval and everything. So it's not a huge.
All right, the next two things I'm going to dive into are probably the two most critical pieces as far as technique and doing it better, making a beautiful mead. So you have the option to boil, heat, sulfate, or au naturel. What does that mean? Up until Ken Schramm and prior to Ken Schramm, most people would simply take a gallon of honey, put it in 3 gallons of water in a big pot, boil the hell out of it, and do both. And there are some benefits of boiling. You can kind of skim off the scum and get rid of the beeswax and the bee antennae and wings or whatever else is floating around. But you really damage the aromatics. You lose most of the aromatics, and got the pluses and minuses right there. And it will darken the honey. You can do a lower heat pasteurization, 140 to 160, based on your old high school chemistry, how long you want to hold it there. And you're going to have similar loss of aromatics, maybe not as much, but you will have the advantage of knowing that it is sanitized. Some people get kind of creeped out that this is an organic product and I'm just going to throw yeast into that. And then there's the no heat, and that's a chemical, potassium metabosulfate, Camden tablets, easily found at any homebrew supply store. It can maintain those aromatics, but there are also some if you have asthma, it can affect you, and it can affect some of the color. So what we have found in the last 15 years is most people are doing it without doing any heat, without doing any chemicals. Now, there are ways to do it if you're concerned about infection. You can take half that honey and the water and start fermenting and let it go a couple of days. That's going to get too esoteric. Bottom line, most mead makers today are using a no-heat method by using exceptional sanitation, making sure everything is sanitized prior to putting the honey and water together. And I have not ever had an infection in a mead, and I have not heated any meads. The only heat I use is to clean out my container. Once I get my gallon out, I'll take some hot tap water, shake it up, throw it in there, and that's also a little helpful for when I'm trying to get the water and honey to kind of mix together. Your results may vary. I mean, if you're concerned about contamination, if you're concerned about an infection, I don't like the argument, well, it's never happened to me, so I continue to do it. I see people grabbing full carboys by the neck and walking away, and I'm like, oh my God, that neck's going to break. Well, it never happened. So I'm arguing against myself here, but I've never had an infection doing it this way. So that's a big deal. If you want to maintain the true aromatics of the honey and what it has to offer, don't use heat. If you're very concerned, you can use potassium sorbate.
With the water, are you doing anything with the water, like distilled or anything like that? Or?
Well, I don't like using distilled water, and I have a mention of it down the road. You want some minerals. I just, believe it or not, like to pre-boil my water the night before. And sometimes I have thrown a Camden in if I've got a lot of chlorine aroma.
You pre-boil it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just to kind of get whatever's in the tap filled.
Use chemical sanitation if you're ever having like raspberries or something that have natural yeast and bacteria.
Gotcha. Great question. No, I don't. And again, you can do that, but what I do is I just freeze it. So this last weekend when I picked this 10 pounds of berries, I put them in a food saver bag and I put them in the freezer. I figured it's going to kill about 99% of the bugs, and that's where I was going down the wrong path. So I might start my honey and water on its own for a couple of days, and about day 3, once it starts building up that alcohol, depending on how big a mead I'm making, it's 6, 8, 10% alcohol or higher, then I'll put the fruit in before the fermentation stops, and that alcohol will kill whatever's left of the bugs there.
Freezing breaks the cell wall, so I was
Absolutely.
a little bit more.
Yep. You read the book.
YouTube lately.
Okay. Very good. And the other key thing, well, first off, anybody here work at White Lab? God, I really like the dry yeast, and they don't make them. There's a little thing on the back of the Lalavan and other dry yeasts on how to prep them, and it really is important to follow these directions. 15 minutes of 104-degree water, you put it in there, you let it hydrate. The cell walls will really be damaged if you don't do this. You'll have much less viable yeast if you don't follow these simple little directions. And I just like to take a cup of water, nuke it, put it aside for the half hour or so. I have a digital thermometer. It's like, okay, 110, 105-ish. And then I put that 100 milliliters in for the yeast. Put it in, don't mess with it. 15 minutes later, stir it and throw it in. dry yeast has come so far, and the Lalevin company, I happen to love them because they have so many wine yeasts, and we're making honey wines here. They really bring out the character. Anything else here?
Do they have? Sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just looking at the comment about the water. Okay, back to the future. The comment about the water. You do need some nutrients that come out of water. If you have distilled water, you're not going to have any nutrients. It's going to be naked. So I do recommend having mineral water instead of distilled water if you're going to use that.
After you dilute the honey, what is the pH typically?
Well, you want to make sure it stays above 4. It used to be 3.6. Now they say 4. You can use, and they're not very, I don't like these, but I'd rather use a pH meter if you're starting cheap. You know, pH strips. You used to use them in the pool and chemistry. That'll get you there. So I took this quote out of the Complete Mead Maker because he's a better scientist than I am, and it really boils down to what I'm about to talk about, staggered nutrient additions. And this is where it can really rock the world of mead making, telling people that you can actually have a fully done mead in 30 days instead of waiting a year. It will be done in 30 days. It will be hot. You'll have some fusel alcohols, and bulk aging will help it cool down. Always recommend patience, but the actual fermentation will be done so quickly, you just don't get that rocket fuel, that nail polish, all the stuff that we used to get pre-Ken Tramp. So this quote here really, and again, if you want to go to this article, okay, will it work? The actual science behind it, it's available online, Optimizing Honey Fermentation on the AHA's website. It talks all about trace elements, vitamins, all the other things that I can't talk about because I'm a marketing major. I'm not a scientist. But it leads to the point, whoops, that I probably just knocked off my presentation.
You still got it.
The other one.
It's the other one. The other tab.
Got it? A staggered nutrient addition is simply adding nitrogen and yeast food to your mead on a steady basis the first several days. And right now, I think it's 300 parts per million you need of nitrogen for a good healthy ferment, and honey has somewhere between 20 and 40 parts per million. So it's severely lacking in the nitrogen necessary to maintain the health of the cell wall in the yeast. That's going to make everything work quickly and cleanly. This is just one. I happen to like to do it on day 1. I put a little DAP and Go Firm. It's a yeast nutrient and a yeast energizer. You can buy it at a homebrew supply shop for a couple of bucks. It's like a 1/4 teaspoon and a 1/2 teaspoon. Day 1, day 2, day 3, and day 4. That's what I do. That's how I remember it. This is somebody else's suggested schedule. The bottom line is you need to give it those nutrients to allow the cell walls to be healthy, to have that good fermentation, and quickly. Little note here. When you are adding nutrients and degassing, and you will need to degas because a lot of CO2 is created. All right.
That's really good.
Well, that's why I put the picture there.
Go, Kris, go!
All right.
All right.
Trust me, you can get a massive amount of CO2 blow-off days 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And so I tend to do 4-gallon buckets, 4-gallon batches in 6.5-gallon buckets.
You can't drink it.
Stop touching the screen.
There we go. I've never worked with this big a touch screen before. It will, and Kris actually did the videotape for me, but
That's my video?
it is your video because I didn't have the password. But it's crazy, and we've had it overflow, and particularly when you're putting that nutrient addition in there on like day 2 or 3. You sprinkle it on top, and you take your little twaddler, and suddenly it's Vesuvius all over the place. So I'm just telling you, this is a good, helpful hint. Be careful as you stir. It happens in day 2 through 5 about, and then you'll notice it diminish significantly.
So you're saying it looks just benign, and you stick your spoon in it, and it...
Yeah, because it's just trapped with CO2. And you need to get rid of the CO2. I'll bring it up here in a minute, but it builds up. It makes... Yep, and it's killing your yeast because it needs to get the CO2 out of it.
Yeah.
It's building up temperature. There's a lot of reasons that you need to get the CO2 out of there.
But it's like a Mentos in a Coke bottle.
Yeah, very much so. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. How many people here, I should have asked this, how many people here have made meads? Okay. Could you back me up on that?
I don't know, I was talking.
All right. Back of the class. Oh, she is in the back of the class. How's that?
Thing? Oh, absolutely. So, yeah.
Could I get that picture back up here? We'll try another one while I'm talking.
Kris, he asked if you're using the paint stirrer at that point, or what is
No, I'm just using a regular white plastic stir stick that we use in homebrewing, and just,
It just happens.
Poof, that's it, sometimes. Temperature, I like to do it on the low sides. I think most people who make good meads do basement floors, basically, cool rooms. I know everybody's wild about this new Quebec yeast and how it does everything at 90 degrees. Give it a try. Let me know how it works for you. But seriously, the higher you ferment it, the more fusel alcohols you get, the more unpleasant it becomes. And it really, a little patience at a cooler temperature has good dividends. pH, I mentioned, want to keep it below 4. You can use potassium or calcium carbonate to modify your pH. If you use, and like I say, most people who make meads make melomels with a lot of frequency, and that's going to bring your pH down anyway. So I've actually, I don't have a pH meter. I've never measured my pH because I almost make all melomels. So how dare me? Did you like the raspberry?
So yeah. Concerned about getting too low of a pH on anything?
No, I've not heard that. I suspect there would be, and if there's a chemist in the room, could somebody answer that question? Is there a concern of the pH getting too low for fermentation? I would imagine at some point.
I would say below
3,
4, 3.5. You might end up having some yeast issues.
That makes sense. I mean,
Big yeast needs lactic problem.
All right, fair enough. And again, I've done a lot of meads, and these are my go-tos. But as we all know, we're sitting in a lab company, or White Labs. They've got, I don't know, 60, 100 with the Vault, and Y Yeast and Lalevin, and just a ton of companies out there that make good yeast. I like to go with what I know works, particularly with melomels. The 71B 1122 is the Beaujolais Nouveau. The beautiful fruit brings it out. The D47 is a workhorse for a lot of commercial meaderies. EC1118, it's a killer yeast. It's a champagne yeast. It's going to bring you down to like 0.0994 or something crazy. And you can adjust that with back sweetening, but it'll take an 18%, 19% fermented beverage and finish it dry.
What would your back sweetening?
We'll talk about that in a minute. So I give this to you because a lot of people say, what do you like to use for yeast? This is a good set of yeast, but there are many out there you could try. I would like to try some Belgian yeast and see whether or not I get some phenolics and some esters and things of that nature. But I come back, and I won't beat this to death, but I come back to the fact that honey is dear, and I'm afraid sometimes to experiment. I need to get down to the gallon size before I start really experimenting. I did an experiment with the AHA's money 5 years ago. I was the founder of the Research and Education program at the AHA, and we had the National Homebrew Conference with almost 3,000 people in Grand Rapids, Michigan 5 years ago. And the timing was perfect, and we bought, we ended up doing 72 gallons of mead, 12 different yeast strains. If you want to learn more about it, it is available online. Same must, 12 different yeasts. And We made this nice poster, kind of went through the process. That's Ken Schramm with 55 gallons of this lovely marshmallow honey from the troll under the bridge, over the Mackinac Bridge. Great beekeeper up there. And heating it up. Yeah, that's what he called himself, the troll under the bridge. And just all of us putting this together. Far too much going on here, but in the article are the write-ups by Ken Schramm, Brad Dahlhofer, who has Bee Nectar Meadery, and 2 national judges who were providing their feedback on what we're getting from the yeast, what sort of aromas and flavors. Yeah, okay. That's some of the best notes I have on making a mead. You saw most of them over there on that bucket. I got a couple more buckets at home that are more recent, but I just bought Beersmith the other day, so I really plan to do better now. But this is what's going around. There you go. So this is a strawberry rhubarb mead. The rhubarb came out of my neighbor's backyard, 4 pounds, 10 pounds of strawberries from the farmer's market, some orange blossom honey, if I recall, and it was dry as a bone. Stop doing that. Dry as a bone. So I happen to have some orange blossom honey mead that had not finished well. It was diabetic. It was so sweet. So this is not always a failure, because you can pour some of that into a really dry mead and you get a nice little sweetness. So I think I put 10 bottles, 120 ounces in a 5-gallon batch of under attenuated orange blossom. So I think it came out kind of like a strawberry rhubarb pie with about 14% alcohol. Pretty good. Do better than me with note-taking, though. Patience. One of my favorite quotes from Ken Schramm. He learned from Dan McConnell and a couple of other greats, and they found some of the meads underneath the stairs 10 years after this gentleman's demise, and it was just Bill Pfeiffer. Thank you, Dan McConnell and Bill Pfeiffer. Bill Pfeiffer passed away, and his nephew called Ken and said, "Hey, we got these 10-year-old meads from my uncle, and we just want the empty bottles. We're going to pour them out unless you have any use for them." And Ken called me at work and said, "Hey, 10-year-old Bill Pfeiffer meads," and I was like, "Boss, my boiler just blew. I got to go home," and drove up to Troy, Michigan to get a bunch of these meads. And this was me serving them at a National Homebrew Conference 10 years ago, and trying to get 30 people a little bit of each 12-ounce bottle was very difficult, but very much appreciated. So back to the point, I said you can do this in 30 days and make a beautiful mead, but it's going to be hot, and you want to bulk age it. And the longer you bulk age it, and I'm saying 6 months to a year is pretty normal in this hobby. If you can let it sit there for 6 months to a year, then when you bottle it, it's almost ready to drink then. And there isn't a mead I have found yet that has gone south. And I've had meads upwards of, well, I've had meads 60 years old with Charlie Papazian, and they did go south. I will say that. It was a Polish mead that he shared with a few people. But you're not going to find many 60-year-old examples. 10 years does not seem to be too much for me to sit down and age and improve and get softer. Aromatics might die off a little bit, but that's about it. So back sweetening, you were asking about back sweetening. So a lot of these meads are going to just finish bone dry. It's going to like take the enamel off your teeth. They're going to be 0.996, and it's like, this isn't pleasant. This is, beyond Chardonnay. It's really dry. And so you can back sweeten. And actually the next one, when that's ready. Back sweetening simply is what you see, is adding a little bit of honey once it's all finished. And you have to put some potassium sorbate in there, or pasteurize if you're good enough to do that, but I'm not going to advise putting heat on it. And that it doesn't kill the yeast, but it stuns the yeast, and they will not restart. And that gives you an opportunity to put some sugar back in it if you want to bottle and not have them blow up.
You want me to send that around?
No, once the pitcher gets back up here, we'll just fill her up.
Okay.
I'll talk about that one in a minute. The downside of back sweetening is that you get the raw honey flavor, and you will get that in this. This is now I've talked about these 10-year-old meads. I've shared with you my 2-year-old meads. I made this 7 weeks ago, and this is a sack mead. This is a strawberry mead I made with 10 pounds of strawberries from Strawberry Hill, South Carolina. Gorgeous, beautiful aroma, just finished dry as a bone. So 3 nights ago, I think I had a couple of beers, and I said, I'm going to take ladle of honey. I didn't measure it. I just kind of whipped it in there. It's probably a little too sweet, but I did the appropriate potassium sorbate for a half gallon, and I wanted to show you that you can actually have meads pretty darn quick that are pretty flavorful. You don't have to wait a year, but it always helps. And we're going to let that degas a little bit. All right. It's a bit of an art. It's not so much a science. Those numbers are approximate, but many of your meads will finish. Does anybody not understand when I say 997? Water is 1000. So they'll finish drier than water. And the other way you can get around not needing to back sweeten is what I did with the raspberry. Just make it a monster mellow melt. Throw in 18 pounds of fruit, 18 pounds of honey, 2 gallons of water, have a 17% alcohol wine, and it just drops the yeast dead. I mean, it goes, too much alcohol.
In how much volume?
About 4.5 gallons.
I know if you're making cider and you cold crash it, you repeatedly rack over a period of like 4 times.
Yep, you'll get
stump the yeast so much you can maintain the sweetness.
There you go. And that with cider, it's even trickier because you're only starting from like 1050, 1048, 1052, and so you got to kind of catch a place saying, oh, it's right about 1012. And by the time you get it cold, it's already still 10:8. I've never succeeded at that because I just don't have that patience. Or actually more alertness than patience. So, any questions about back sweetening? Nope. Okay. A few more thoughts. Okay, so obviously honey can crystallize and get really hard to pour. So I like to preheat. I use little pads or wraparounds, but you can put them in a sink with hot water. If you buy it by the 5 gallons, it's expensive. Get this freaking tool to get the lid off. Oh my God, I've about torn my fingers off. And if you're fermenting in a plastic bucket over there, it's simply, when you put on that top and you put the airlock in there, I don't know how many people here in construction, but you probably don't have a problem, but I'm an office worker and I really have a problem tearing that top off once a day to put in the nutrients and wick it up. So this is like $2 on any homebrew supply area. Boy, I totally digressed. But yeah, you put this as a 5-gallon bucket and you put it in hot water, you do that. Scales, really helpful because pouring honey, it's really hard if you've got a 5-gallon thing. If you buy it by 1 gallon and you make a 4-gallon batch, it's easy. Just pour the whole thing in. Plastic tart. Honey is sticky, really sticky. And wet towels, because you'll want the wet You'll want the wet towel.
Yellow jacket killer, maybe.
What?
Yellow jacket killer.
Yellow jacket killer. Yeah, well, I'll get to that point in a moment, yeah. So this is just a little setup. My wife found this beautiful little hydraulic cart, actually, which is nice for us older people lifting up heavy weights that are getting beyond us. Yeah.
I think you skipped past the gallon to weight ratio there.
Yeah, that's
because you've been talking gallons, but then also pounds. And that
okay.
Doesn't.
So yeah, honey weighs just under 12 pounds a gallon. A bucket is about 60 pounds, and so yes, it's. What else do you want to know?
Which way do you usually buy your honey? By the weight or by the fluid?
Oh, I always buy it by the gallons, not by the weight.
Right.
Unless I go to Costco and then it's $5 for, or
$5.
10, what is it? 5 pounds in their little jar, container, not jar. They sell them by 5-pound clover. But typically I buy it by the gallon. I either buy it by a gallon or I buy it by 5 gallons. There was somebody I was hoping who would be here today. Local, beautiful wildflower. It's about $300 for 5 gallons. And I think he was selling it for $76 a gallon individually. So I bought a gallon of it and I'm fermenting it out just as a plain still. But think about it. All right, so let's call it $80. Let's call it $80 for a gallon, and you're going to do a 3-to-1 ratio. That's 4 gallons. 4 gallons, and then you're going to put, let's say, $30 worth of fruit, $20 worth of fruit. In the end of the day, you're making a beautiful bottle of wine, something that's can be indescribably delicious for somewhere around the price of $8 to $10 a bottle. And I don't know whether they still have $2 chuck, but going up the ladder a little bit, $3 now. it is what it is. I mean, we as homebrewers typically don't care about the cost of our ingredients to make it as good as possible. Honey is expensive. John knows I choked when I heard that price, and I was ready to buy a 5-gallon bucket, and I bought one. I wasn't prepared. I didn't have $300. What can I say? But yeah, no, I typically buy it by the gallon. And you have to work with if you're going to find it locally, beekeepers, they're not going to be selling 5-gallon buckets at the farmer's market. Chances are they're not even going to be selling 1 gallon. They're going to be selling everything from the squeeze bear to a quart to a pint. And that's when you need to discuss and say, okay, I get it, but I'm looking for bulk. Are you willing to sell me a gallon? Can you tell me about what the varietal is? What are your flowers? What are your, is this pure wildflower, or has it got something special? I moved here and I heard all about sourwood, and I had yet to taste the mead made by sourwood. I understand last year there wasn't really any sourwood production because of storm losses and wind and what have you, that I should not try to buy anything that's called sourwood from 2018. It probably wasn't. I understand this year the running's good, so I look forward to trying to make a sourwood mead.
Get it tested. Get it certified.
Well, okay.
Otherwise, it's baloney.
While we're talking about certified baloney, Mark brought some local wildflower. If you've all got your little sticks still, this had an amazing initial impact when I tasted it, and I think you'll smell and taste it.
There's more sticks back here.
Yep, still get it.
You pass it around.
Yep, I'm asking. So, as a home brewer or mead maker, I probably don't have the resources to get it tested. Talk to me, Mark, for a minute about getting it tested.
If somebody wants to sell sourwood, which commands a premium price, it's up to them to get it tested. Okay, it's pretty, you send samples to Texas to the lab or whatever. They do a pollen count, and if the pollen is 50% or more of a particular varietal, then you can legally label it.
Very nice.
But most of what you're finding that's sold as sourwood or anything else locally is somebody's wild guess.
Yeah, he's not saying you get it tested.
That's what I thought I
would
heard
pay
say.
a premium price for somebody telling you it's sourwood, because at best it's usually 20-30%. It really depends on when they pull their frames.
Yep.
It's a sourwood's got a 2-week season. You got to clear out the hive and just leave them frames where they're only going to be bringing in sourwood and whatever else happens to be flowering at that time, which is several other things.
Yep.
Clover, crepe myrtle, whatever. So yeah.
Maple syrup's the same way, obviously.
Absolutely.
There's a spectacular difference between levels of actuality of maple syrup.
Okay.
So, Mark, when is the season for sourwood blossom?
Sourwood is just ending right now. It's coming a little earlier than it had because of climate change. But usually it's the end of June to mid-July. And this year, in most areas, it started about a week earlier. So there's still some sourwood blooming, but not much. It's mostly gone.
So when would we look for sourwood from you?
Well, what you need to do is find somebody that has extracted in May,
Okay.
so that it's not mixed.
Okay.
Extracted in May or June. And then they put in drawn out cone, and much of what's going to be collected from late June through mid-July is going to be sourwood, but it won't, again, it depends if they're in a sourwood grove, there's a lot
And
of
the other thing
sourwood
I've noticed from the beekeepers I'm meeting is that they've got honey that's sitting still in the combs from last fall because, hey, until I need to separate it, it's going to sit there. So you may not be able to, you need to get a relationship and a trust.
You do. And the other thing you have to watch out for is beekeepers feed sugar water in the wintertime. I put food color in my sugar water so I can tell if a frame is sucrose honey, and I won't extract that. I leave that for the bees to eat. But, I think it's unfair to sell as honey something made from, table sugar, but a lot of beekeepers don't do that. I mean, they don't worry about what gets mixed in. And I think that you just got to really, like you said, establish a relationship with a beekeeper whom you trust, and then work with them.
Thank you, Mark.
So
Karen.
if I've got really limited mead experience, but almost all of it has been too sweet to me. And is there a kind of champagne approach to mead? I mean, is there a kind of really dry, but really nuanced?
A lot of the commercial stuff.
Dry, I understand.
A lot of the
Like
commercial.
the taste sound very dry.
A lot of the commercial stuff is trying to appeal to the masses. I mean, it's even like lambics, where they put in the invert sugars that don't ferment to make them sweeter, the aspartame or whatever it is. The American taste wanted sweet, but actually most homebrewers will struggle to make a mead sweet. It will probably, that's 100% fermentable. That is fructose, glucose,
That's what I would have thought.
just goes boom to the bottom.
But does it not taste good? I mean, does dry mead not taste good?
It can be pleasant, but I think most meads are going to end up about 0.995, give or take 3 points. And most people would prefer to see it around 1.010, a little bit of sugar. And I had a slide up there that said, you get 7-8 points if you add a pound to a 5-gallon. So you back sweeten it a little bit, I think just makes it more, you want to taste the honey. You want to get a sensation of sweetness in it without it being cloying.
A little bit, but like I said, most of it's overpowering me, which is like turning on. I'd like to taste a subtle, dry, gentle.
You've got it. I'm taking longer than I should, so I just want to take a point here. Melomels are my favorite, and there are a bunch of things you have to watch out for. It talks about heat, CO2, and drying. But bottom line, so you get that big old bag of 15 pounds of raspberries that you spent dearly on, and it's sitting in your bucket, and every day you're opening it up twice a day for that 30 days that you're going to let that fruit in there. You've got to punch down the cap, because you'll get stuff growing on the top, bugs, mold, crap. You're done. So you got to punch it down at least twice a day, just mildly get it all wet, flip it around. This is tied in a knot. By the way, these little gloves I steal from my dentist every time I'm in the office. I can put them in sanitizer, and then I can handle the bag and stuff. Little tech tips. But heat builds up underneath the cap, the fruit cap, and that heat is a bad thing. And a lot of CO2 will also be trapped underneath there. So if you're making a melomel, commit yourself 21 to 28 days in that primary bucket, twice a day, punch down the cap. Mildly, punch sounds so violent, just mildly get it wet, flip it over like a mother of vinegar or something, and then close it off again. And I say close it off again, if I got this, start my car.
So that's twice a day without exception.
Twice a day without exception. Fruit flies. Fruit flies. Where do they come from? That it happens every time. When you're working with fruit, you're going to have fruit flies. So this is me trying to get the last drips out of my fermenter as I'm getting ready to rack. And I've covered it in aluminum foil, and that lasted about 3 minutes until I started seeing fruit flies. I said, all right, that's it. You have to be prepared to lose 10 to 15% of your fruit. It's just going to be lost. When you're doing your calculations, there's a mush that's just never going to clarify, and it's not worth squeezing the bag because you're going to make a hellacious mess out of your mead, and it'll take 2 more rackings to clarify, and you'll have left everything that you could have left behind if you didn't mush it. Want to have some fun? Dump out your fruit in your backyard and let the bears have it. What could go wrong? 15% fruit. Woohoo! Get a video for it. Lots of resources. This is just touching it, really. The AHA, really, this book, it's getting dated. It's 15 years old. I have to admit, all full disclosure, I'm dear friends with Ken. But this changed my life when it came to making mead. It's well written. It's not overly scientific. You go to page 64, I think it is. They've got the staggered nutrient addition laid out for a marketing guy like me to be able to figure out with 1.25 teaspoon to 5 gallons. And damn, it started going out great. I mean, it changed my meads so overnight, and it's just simple.
And I just looked it up. It's only $15 on Amazon.
Okay, very good. And if you see Ken at a conference, he'll sign it and he'll put a nice little beekeeper thing there, beehive. But
that's it. You know, I was trying to throw a lot of stuff out there. I didn't touch on things like oak. Oak is beautiful with meads and melomels. 1 to 2 ounces of a nice medium toast to a 5-gallon batch for a week or two. Just throw some cubes in there. You don't have to go crazy with barrels. Beautiful things to put into a mead. Really, a ginger. Ken makes one called the Tina Louise. I guess she was ginger in Gilligan's Island, but they found him and had to stop using that name. But what a wonderful drink. Oops. The vanilla beans, cinnamon, just there's so many wonderful things you can do with mead. And you know, you can make a bunch of still mead, show meads, just simple 12, 15% meads, get them in your carboy, secondary, let them sit there, do them in the winter, and then come the spring and the summer, get your fruits. Get those fruits, freeze them, thaw them out, rack them right on top of the fruit. You've already got the mead done. And you know, just get that flavor going. Any questions, particularly from the beekeepers?
No, it looks complicated though.
So we're going to do a mead.
I'm going to try it, by the way.
We're going to make a mead. We're going to do a mead making demo, physical demo, right. August 10th. Yes, speak, sir.
Some of you have been to my place with the big beer bash, Fairview, Garrett Creek Road. There'll be more information coming out, I'm sure, on my website. But August the 10th.
After lunch.
How much? What are you going to do? Like 5 gallons, or how much?
What I'd like to do, and I'll start with this crew, but we'll do it through the email and web service. Is I'd like to propose that we try to do a 5-gallon purchase, so 3 other people could join us and each make a nice mead out of that, and then other people who may not be feeling like spending that money at the time. But if you do 5-gallon purchase from the source we have today, Stan?
David.
David. Last name starts with an S. Stallings, that's it. $300 for 5 gallons, so that'd be mathematics $60 a gallon.
Yeah.
Which makes it, you know, that's reasonable. And that way we can, you and I can each kind of go off and make our own, and people can kind of either watch or participate and see. It's really simple. It's not like brewing beer. There's no flames. There's no thermometer. Well, you can use a thermometer, but I mean, it's really pretty quick and easy. Once everything is sanitized, the whole process is an hour. And then take it home and feed it for a couple of days. And if you're putting fruit in it, stir it for a month.
So if you do 5 gallons of honey, that makes 20 gallons of mead?
20 to 25, yeah. You don't have to make it sack. You can make it, you know, traditional, or you can make it hypermel, even smaller.
Okay.
How long, for people's information, how long is the process going to take to do the 5 gallons? How many to make the 20, 25 gallons of mead? How long on that Saturday?
I would say we give ourselves, you know, let's be kind to ourselves and say it's going to be 2 to 5, but we'll be done and clean by 5. You know, because there'll be meat tasting, there'll be Valhalla, we'll be going and, you know, losing our point place as it happens. The last mead I've got here to share, and I'm just going to leave them popped open here. There is buckwheat mead, and it's no, I didn't do 100%. It's about a 20% buckwheat, but buckwheat is this really dark, smoky, caramelized honey. I don't know if caramelized is the right word, but it's a very different creature. And there are other mesquite and other honeys that are really dark and intense, but I wanted folks to have a chance. The Ann Arbor Brewers Guild, I think 6 years ago, we did what we call a meadola, and maybe it's something I'll do here, where we put out a recipe and then let people pick their own yeast. But basically, we bought the buckwheat, we bought the clover. Everybody had the 20/80 combination, and then went home and did what they were going to do to it, whether they oaked it or whether they put some herbs in it or what have you. But, it's something you should taste it, and you should realize you should never ferment 100% buckwheat. It's not good. Questions? Yes, sir.
Okay, so for yeast, I see wine yeast is popular.
Yes, very.
Is there any interest in the mead community in using different yeasts, phenolic yeast,
Belgian-like,
Brettanomyces? I mean, is
so
there
Michael
any point
Fairbrother,
to it, or is there any interest in it?
There is. Michael Fairbrother is very well known for his Moonlight Meadery out of New Hampshire, and he speaks every year at the National Homebrew Conference. And he had tried for years to make a sour mead, and was not very successful. until recently, and he's been doing a lot of barrel aging with meads. Beyond just getting the bourbon-like flavors, he's been trying to inoculate with the Brettanomycins and sour, or wild, I should say, wild yeast, not sour. And commercially, there isn't a whole lot of interest in it. Barrel aging, there is, to get that nice vanilla tannins and things like that.
But just for an oak?
Yes,
okay.
just on an oak. Sour, I don't think anybody's come up with anything that is like...
No, not necessarily sour, but I mean, is there any point to using a yeast that has more character to it?
Not a wine yeast.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Like I said, it's deer, and I'm old school, so I tend not to veer too far from the wine yeast. But I'm also saying I'm a pussy about it because I don't want to waste my money. And you want to use Quebec, you want to use Brettanomycin, go for it. And I'd love to have somebody, part of the reason I'm doing this here today is I came down here, and there was no real community of mead makers in this area. And in Michigan, every other home brewer is deep into making meads and sizers and ciders. And so I'm trying to cross-pollinate you guys with beekeepers, so there's going to be some meads at these meetings next year.
But you haven't seen that, like, a thing. It's not a thing yet.
It's not a commercial thing, but it's something that any dedicated mead maker is going down the path of trying different yeasts. I mean, that's why I did the experiment on someone else's dime. I used 12 different yeast strains, and a couple of them were Belgian. And I was not in love with what ended up coming out.
Okay, gotcha.
And I haven't seen, like, the national level, looking at the mead, like mead judging, I haven't seen tons of, like, Brett meads and that kind of stuff yet. There occasionally are in there, but and I don't really see that the scores are...
Sounded like Belgian mead kind of sucked.
Yeah.
Something like that. Okay, good enough.
But you could work your way gradually with a braggot. Start with a nice Belgian triple malt bill, and then maybe add 4 pounds of honey instead of rock candy sugar, and start morphing it over toward a more mead-like product. This, by the way, is I mentioned the BJCP, Beer Judge Certification Program, has added mead to its ranks in the last couple of years. You probably can't read this, but again, if anybody wants this presentation, I can send it to you email. And this is the fault list and some of the things to a judge who is judging a mead might be looking for or hoping not to find in your mead, and some of the potential causes. I thought I'd put out there because it's another good resource. Building a vocabulary, I think I mentioned it right at the beginning. When I started, I brewed 15, 18 years before I took the BJCP test for beer. And I had a real hard time initially getting my vocabulary to get granular enough to say, well, it tastes bready. Well, toasty. Well, there's a lot of subdivisions to the sort of bready, toasty aroma. Same thing with meads, and I really, to this day, struggle with cider. That's a hard one for me to parse into finer characteristics. So my advice, start making it, play with the yeast, support your local beekeepers.
Yes.
Cheers. If there are any questions, you can come up and ask me.
Awesome job.
So did anybody bring any meads that they would like to highlight back at the table? I think or are not at the table?
Yep. What you got?
Drink some old.
Yeah, pop them up.
I didn't even know he was with the other 80.
Clover.
That young strawberry was amazing.
Isn't it? Not bad for 7 weeks old.
Oh, I wasted. Kris would like to see. I ask about you every time.
Oh, I
I'm
know.
like,
Go ahead. Try some puppy soup.
No, that's okay.
he thought I had 2 glasses. But I just
Yeah. I want to talk to you. I need some honey too, I guess. I've been to your brewery. We talked about it. Yeah.
I like this one actually.
You're right.
It doesn't seem as sweet.
I was thinking.
Actually, she says, "Oh my God, that's the sweetest meat you've ever put in front of me."
I said, I taste things. I don't really drink things. And I was like, you like this? This is like my kind of sweetness. And he really thinks a lot better.
I didn't want to scare you into saying, "Oh, you got to wait 10 years to have it back."
Yeah.
You know, and we can bring
Chewy, and it's, I've never had the strawberry.
All right, before we
that.
complete chaos, I asked Mark to try to give us a little 5-minute spiel on honey. We're all just running out of time.
Cool.
So since we have a couple shutters here, Mark is gracious enough to actually tell us about honey, so maybe we'll be a little informed when we all run out and start buying these gallons of honey in the near future. I know we were talking about sourwood before and different varietals, and I was kind of hoping we might figure out what that actually means.
One of the things that
we're on camera. Would you mind coming up there?
Sure.
One of the things that Kris touched on earlier is really important to know that about 80% of grocery store honey is adulterated. It doesn't matter if you get it from Ingles or Publix or whatever. They're buying from big wholesale distributors that are primarily getting Chinese honey, which is adulterated with rice syrup, corn syrup, and other things. So it's not really pure honey. Most people can't tell the difference, but you're paying a premium price, really more than local honey would cost, for a very, very poor product. The other thing you don't want, or most people don't want, is pasteurized honey. Because when you pasteurize honey, you destroy the really valuable components in honey. Honey is antimicrobial by nature. There's been situations when they found honey that was thousands of years old in a tomb, and it was still perfectly edible. No spoilage, no microbial, no mold, no nothing. Yeah, honey will last indefinitely. Now, some honey will crystallize. That doesn't mean it's bad honey. But most honey, most pure honey, doesn't crystallize at room temperature. It really depends on the combination of sugars that determines whether or not it's going to crystallize. Okay, a little bit on beekeepers. What you should know is that there are several hundred beekeepers in Buncombe and Henderson County. My club, I'm from Henderson County, we have 350 members. I'm sure that Buncombe has even more members than we have. And most of them are small, 1, 2, 3, 4 hives. Some of them are bigger, kind of commercial beekeepers. And the commercial beekeepers, there's some in this area that have 600 to 1,000 hives or more. And those guys aren't generally interested in selling honey. What they're selling is pollination services. For example, the apple groves in Henderson County will pay anywhere from $150 to $185 if you move your hives there for 2 weeks during the flowering season. And then they go from there to blueberries or to squash, or some of them will ship all the way to California to do the almond groves. They pay $250 per hive. But, you kill a lot of bees going from here to California, so I wouldn't do it. I'm a relatively small beekeeper. I've got, right now I've got 10 hives. Next year I'll probably go up to 20. I anticipate doing a lot of splits. To give you an idea of what to get started, what it costs is the cost of your equipment may run $200 to $300, including your initial hive, your suit, your protective gear, and then the frames that go inside. Almost every beekeeper, when they start, should join a club, get some training. The courses available, for example, usually start around January. They run for 2 weeks, or 2 hours per week for up to 7 or 8 weeks. Okay, so you get about 14 hours. But the most valuable part of that is not just the training, but you get a mentor, somebody that will help you recognize disease or teach you how to handle your bees safely and whatever. For the most part, beekeeping is very, I call it Zen. And the reason is you really can't be a jerk and be a successful beekeeper. Bees pick up on the vibe. If you're too rushed, if you're too impatient, if you're too angry, you will get stung. On the other hand, I can sit on an easy chair in the middle of 10 hives with 500,000 bees for an hour and never get stung. They'll bump into me, they'll pop on my head because I may be in their path. You know, they haven't decided, you know, they're going back to their hive, and I wasn't there last time they returned, so they bump into me. But they don't sting. They're very, very passive. The only time I worry about getting stung is when I'm stealing their honey. They're not that crazy about that, you know. And so you have to wear protective gear, and you smoke them and whatever. Now, let's talk about honey quality. The most honest beekeepers in this area will sell wildflower honey. Why wildflower? Because they have no idea what's in it, really, other than, you know, at the very beginning of the season, it's dandelion, and then it's clover, and then it's tulip poplar, and locust, and then blackberry, and wild roses, if they've got that in the neighborhood. I have probably 20 or 30 different types of pollen in my honey. Now, I can tell you, just based on the time of year, what it might predominantly be. You know, for me, my first extraction is likely to be mostly clover with tulip poplar and dandelion. Okay, and if I pull that and extract in, say, May, that's what it's going to be. It's going to be predominantly that. But the only way to honestly sell a varietal honey is you have to know exactly when that tree or pollination is going to come. You know, when the flowers are going to, and the nectar flow is going to be. You have to pull all the frames that are in your hive that don't belong to that and put in what we call drawn-out frame. Drawn-out frame is frame that you've already extracted honey from, but it's empty. So they don't have to put a lot of energy into making new wax. If they don't have to put any energy in, then all of the nectar they collect goes into honey production. So that's really, really important. And when a beekeeper is first starting out, the first year or two, it's terrible because they're starting with bare frames, and all of the energy that the bees are putting into gathering nectar goes into producing wax, which comes out in little sheets underneath their abdomen, and they extract that and they build the wax frames. But it pretty much means your first year you're not going to get any honey. You're really going to just have your bees building out the hive, and then you feed heavily with sugar water so that they've got 60 pounds to make it through the winter. Yeah.
Are you capable of providing them with additional beeswax, like maybe purchasing small amounts of baking?
You can kind of paint it on. There is something very, very new is now you can buy drawn-out frame. I wouldn't buy it. And not because it isn't good, but because it doesn't hold up in an extractor. You know, your extractors are radial, centrifugal extractors, and they don't have I use plastic frames that are coated with wax to give them a taste to get started with. But when I put a plastic frame in the extractor, the honey comes out, the wax stays because it's connected to the plastic, you know, the core that it's attached to. So that's more durable. It's a little bit more expensive to get started, but it works better in the long run. Varietals, okay. Unless somebody tests their honey, they should not really sell it as a varietal. They should not sell it as, especially sourwood. Sourwood brings about $3 or $4 more per pound, sometimes more in our area. Legally, they're supposed to get it tested. You send it to a lab in Texas, and they put it, you know, through a testing machine, and they count the pollen grains, and they identify all the pollen. And in order to legally sell sourwood properly, ethically, I should say, not legally, ethically sell sourwood, it has to be at least 50% of the pollen has to be from sourwood. The same would be true of Tupelo honey or orange blossom honey. Now, orange blossom honey is pretty easy to do because they just put the frames in an orange grove for several hundred acres, and they're pretty sure they're just getting that. during the early part of the spring here in this area, you can get, apple flower honey. That's, again, we have huge acreage, lots of apples, lots of acreage, and so that's really what they're going to be collecting predominantly. But right now, we're coming to the end of the sourwood bloom, and I know I've got sourwood in my honey, but I'm not going to test it because it's expensive, and I'm not going to sell it as sourwood. I'll sell it as a wildflower blend. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
So if you buy sourwood, how do you know that it's been tested?
You have to ask the grower, or the honey producer. A lot of people label it, and it's not honest. They just collected it during the end of the sourwood season. The other thing is, and this I mentioned it a little bit earlier, all beekeepers, right now we're about to enter what's called a dearth, which is a period of time when there's insufficient nectar to support the hive. So what the bees will do is they'll eat their honey stores during a dearth, or you provide them with sugar water so that they don't eat up all their honey. Now, and I think this is the only ethical way to do it, I use non-toxic food coloring, green, and I put it in my sugar water. And then I can look at a frame and know that this is sugar water and not real honey. Okay, and I will leave that for the bees to eat during the wintertime. It's fine for them, but it's not real honey. So I wouldn't sell it as honey, and I wouldn't mix it. If I have a frame that's half green and half amber, the bees keep it, even though I'm giving them, some honey. So that's just I feel, I've been in the insurance business for a lot of years, and all my business is referral. And it's all referral because I treat people very, very honestly. And I don't sell them things that aren't in their best interest. And I feel the same way about the bee business. That if you're going to be honest with people, you'll have repeat customers and you'll do well. Beekeeping, for most people, is a hobby that you won't make money on. I've spent, last year, $3,000 on equipment. I've made $500 on honey sales. Okay, so you can see now, next year I'll do better because I spent a lot of money on. I mean, I'm buying very expensive hives out of Greece, so they're imported, and I'm buying them because they're insulated, and they're maintenance free. But the most important thing is they survive through the winter much easier in an insulated hive than they would in a wooden hive. Right now in North Carolina, we've got the average winter loss is 40% of hives die. Now that's due to a couple things. One is we have an imported mite called a varroa destructor mite, which can infect the hive and both suck the juices, the lymphatic fluid, out of the bees, which weakens them, and introduce disease. We're trying to breed queens that are what we call hygienic, that develop the behavior of attacking the varroa mite. But it's kind of difficult because the eggs are laid inside a chamber on top of larvae, and so they're hidden, they're capped, and so our challenge is to control this introduced pest. Beekeeping before 1985 was very easy. We didn't have this pest introduced in the United States. Now it's pretty challenging. The other thing that's very, very, very challenging that's relatively new to beekeeping is the extent of agricultural chemicals being used, which is mind-bogglingly huge. And some of it is very, very damaging to bees. There's a character called, or a pesticide called neonicotinoid. And basically it's a seed that is coated in nicotine, which is a very powerful nerve poison. And what that does is it kills the grubs that would eat the seed in the ground. But trace amounts of nicotine enter the plant, and a bee takes like 1 million trips collecting nectar to make an ounce of honey. It's just like incredible how busy these bees are. But every trip they make to a field that has been treated with neonics introduces a tiny amount of nicotine into their system, which makes it to the point where they can't find their way back to the hive. It creates an imbalance in their orientation. So neonics are very popular in agriculture today. Roundup is very, very popular in agriculture today. It's toxic to bees, not in normal quantities, but remember they go to that field 100 times, and every little time they bring it back and they can store it in the wax, it becomes a cumulative problem inside the hive. So beekeepers are trying to convince agriculture, 70% of your crops are pollinated by either native or domestic bees. 70%. The American food supply would crash without domestic bees because agriculture has killed most of the native pollinators. You may notice there are not as many around as there used to be in the last few years. So with the lack of native pollinators, domestically managed hives like mine become more and more important to agriculture. And frankly, I'm not really happy about the fact that I've got farmers in the general area that are putting my hives in danger. So
Send them a bill. Yeah.
Well, they're looking at their bottom line, their economy. And what's changed? My degree is in agriculture. What has changed in agriculture?
You own the bees. Say, I can control these bees.
Yeah.
I want a little payment.
Yeah. The problem is the bees.
You can send them to our farm.
You're good. My bees already go to your farm, and the reason is they forage for 3 miles. You're just in my area.
Mark, can you just briefly explain for the stigma people about bees? And I've got a bunch of mine where I live.
Yeah.
Well, they're different types of bees. When you say bees,
okay,
can you be specific?
Okay, there are 600 different types of bees. Okay, and I don't know how many hundreds different kinds of hornets. The bees that are the most productive in terms of pollination are a domesticated honeybee called Apis melliflora. Apis melliflora. And
so they strictly the hives, they're not the honeybees in the ground.
No, and nor are they the mason bees or the carpenter bees. No.
So it's okay for me to try to kill my carpenter bees.
Yes. And the Asian hornets and stuff like that. For the most part, what you have to do is just be careful about your distribution of poisons, so that you don't. But to give you an idea how quickly a hive can populate, a queen bee a good queen bee lays anywhere from 1,000 to 2,500 eggs per day. Okay. So you come into the springtime. Now you're going to have a winter die-off. My bees will start dying off around October, November. And they breed it's not breed so much as they develop a special kind of winter bee. The normal bee only lives 6 weeks. The normal winter bee lives only 6 weeks. But a winter bee lives 6 months. And so it will carry them.
Summer bee?
It's called a winter bee, but the only difference is she's fat. They just feed the heck out of her, and they get her ready. And they're kind of like a penguin colony, which is they cluster around the queen. They create a ball around the queen, and then the cold ones on the outside will move on the inside, and the warm ones on the inside come out. But they want to keep the queen at about 95 degrees throughout the winter, no matter what the temperature is. And if she lives through the winter, because she's got a sufficiently effective cluster around her, then come February or March, she explodes into production. So you may have, my hive, for example, will come out of winter with, if I'm lucky, 2,000 bees, okay, at the end of February. By the beginning of May, it'll be 50,000 bees. They explode. And what happens is they reach a point, and this is what the beekeeper has to do. The beekeeper has to know what's going on in the hive. So you do inspections. When a hive is feeling crowded, and they feel crowded because either the cells are full of honey, and the queen has no place to lay, okay, that's called honey bound. Okay, and then she will leave and take half the hive with her, looking for a place where she can reestablish. That's called a swarm, and you want to catch your swarms. But you also want to manage your swarming behavior. So you go into your hives, once you see the population is exploding, and you look for evidence that the queen is ready to leave and create a new hive. And that's they create queen cells. A queen cell is an empty cell that's much longer, but is prepared to receive a larva and be capped as a queen. A queen cup is one where it's already been capped, and the queen will emerge. To give you an idea, a worker takes 21 days to develop. A drone, a male, an unfertilized egg, takes 28 days. A queen only takes 14 days. If you see a queen cell in your hive, you know that you're going to have a queen emerging within if it's capped, it's going to be emerging in about 4 days. And so you're going to have a war between the existing queen and the new queen. Now, usually what happens is the existing queen says, I did this on purpose. I was getting ready to leave. I'm taking care of you by making a new queen. And she leaves. And she probably only goes 100 yards. Sometimes she goes 10 feet. You know, and you'll get this mass of, 10,000 or more bees all clustered around a queen. Now, have you ever seen pictures of guys that cover themselves with bees? They got a bee beard and stuff like that. That's a swarm. They are the gentlest bees in the world. They're just looking for a new place. They're confused. They're sending out scout bees looking for different locations. And you can pick them up by hand and scoop them into a new box. And once you find the queen and you put her in a new hive, all of the others will march in within about 10 or 20 minutes. They'll march in, they'll fly down, they will amass with the queen. So you create opportunities to expand your apiary, your beehive situation, by managing your hive and looking for queen behavior, and then letting her do her thing. So that's any other thoughts? Or I'm taking up more time than I should, I think.
I have a question. Have you ever seen the mycelium for strengthening bee immunity? You see that?
I've seen that they're talking about it.
No, it's pretty well proven as far as I know.
I know, but I don't know that it's available right now.
Oh, yeah, that's a good
That's the problem. It's They found that that some type of mushroom produces. It's not an antibiotic, but basically it strengthens their immune system.
It strengthens our immunity too.
Oh, there you go.
Mushrooms, and sometimes if they can feed in the mycelium, so if you happen to grow wine caps or which is like King's Septaria, whatever.
Right.
Wine caps, essentially they grow big. They'll grow on orchards, and you can plant.
Fantastic.
And they'll eat it, and that'll strengthen their.
I'm waiting for them to come out with a extract that I can just put in their syrup or something. Well, they're developing it. I don't know if it's commercially available yet.
Maybe not, but it's cool stuff.
Any other thoughts? Anybody interested in becoming a beekeeper here? You are, okay. Join your local bee club. Okay, there's one in Buncombe County, there's one in Henderson County, pretty much every county. The one in Buncombe and Henderson are both extremely active, good chapters, and you will get both training. The courses typically take place when the bees are hibernating. They're not really hibernating, but they're not doing much, from November to say the end of February. So the classes take place. It's usually $60 for a 7-week course, and very well worth it. And the instructors and the people that you'll meet there, you'll almost certainly acquire a mentor that lives nearby where you live, somebody that you can call anytime you have a question or something as you develop your own skills. Yes?
One time to be early, for winter loss, I read that putting hay bales around and keeping them out of the prevailing wind will increase the temperature.
It can help. The thing is, people are beekeepers in Alaska without worrying about that sort of thing. I think the big killer for bees in the wintertime is moisture. You don't want to feed syrup in the wintertime because the moisture will cause them to inhibit their ability to retain their heat. You may want to reduce half the size of the ventilation on the bottom of the hive. But for the most part, they will cluster in the center of the hive. You know, you may have an 8 or a 10 frame hive. They'll be on the inner 2 frames, and there'll be a big ball of them around the queen. And throughout the winter, some of them will die, you know, but usually they will survive. But they will only survive if you have treated for mites, say in November or December, so that they're not going in with a burden of, a parasite. And then you feed them when they're, and always leave a hive with about 60 pounds of honey to make it through the winter. Now, a large frame of honey weighs about 10 pounds. So 6 large frames or 8 medium frames is enough. And my bees will produce, I've got, 3 layers, and so I can take anywhere from 50 to 100 pounds of honey per hive while still leaving them an adequate amount for the winter time, for winter survival.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.